My name is Danielle Marie Marsh. Most people call me Dani. I am 29 years old. It started with my mother's face going pale at her own kitchen table on a Sunday afternoon in March, while my sister sat across from her holding up a phone screen and asking, in a voice I'd never heard her use before, "Mom, what does this mean?" My mother looked at the screen for a long moment. Then she looked at Whitney. Then she looked at me like she was checking whether I already knew, whether this was somehow a moment I'd been let in on without her. I hadn't been let in on anything. My mother set down the dish towel she'd been holding, pulled out a chair, and sat down across from both of us at the table where I'd eaten approximately 10,000 meals growing up. "Sit down," she said to me, even though I was already sitting. "Both of you, there's something I need to tell you. I should have told you both a long time ago. I want to take you back to the beginning." Because by the time my mother said that sentence, there were 30 years of small things, moments I'd never quite been able to explain to myself, that were about to make sense all at once. Before I take you there, if stories like this one matter to you, please like and subscribe. And in the comments, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. I read everyone. Now, back to the beginning. I grew up in Tucson, Arizona, in a 3-bedroom house on the east side that my parents bought in 1989, 3 years before my sister Whitney was born. My dad, Tom Marsh, has run his own HVAC repair business. Just him, and for a while, one employee, for as long as I can remember. In Tucson, in the summer, an HVAC guy is never out of work, but it's also feast or famine in a specific way. When something breaks, it's an emergency and people pay whatever it costs, and the rest of the time, you're patching together maintenance contracts and hoping nothing slow gets worse. My mom, Carol, worked part-time at a pharmacy on Speedway Boulevard for over 20 years, not because we needed the income exactly, but she always said, "For something to do that's mine." Whitney is 4 years older than me. Growing up, the 4-year gap meant we were never really in the same world. She was starting high school when I was starting 4th grade. She was driving when I was still riding my bike to school. But even accounting for the age gap, there was a pattern in our house that I noticed early and never had words for until I was much older. Whitney was the one things worked out for. I don't mean that as an insult to her. I mean it almost like a law of physics in our house. If Whitney wanted something, a school trip, a car, a deposit for an apartment, there was, eventually, a way. It might take some saving, some will figure it out, some conversation behind a closed bedroom door between my parents that I'd hear murmurs of from the hallway. But it happened. For me, the answer to almost everything, growing up, was some version of "we'll see" that quietly, over time, turned into "not this year." I want to tell you about one specific summer, because it's the one I've measured almost everything else against, without ever fully realizing I was doing it. The summer I was 15, our local fire department ran a program called the Junior Explorer Academy, 2 weeks, residential, for teenagers interested in fire and EMS careers. You got to do ride-alongs, learn basic first aid and CPR, tour the dispatch center, talk to actual paramedics about the job. I'd wanted to be a paramedic since I was maybe 10 years old. I used to watch the ambulances go by our house and just follow them with my eyes until they turned the corner. The program cost $450. I found the flyer myself at school, and I brought it home so excited I could barely get the words out. My parents looked at it together at the kitchen table. My dad did the thing he does, picked it up, read it twice, set it down, picked it back up. My mom said, "Let us think about it, honey." 2 weeks later, the answer was, "Not this year." Money was tight, Dad's truck needed a new transmission, it was an $1,100 repair, and we just can't swing both. I understood. I really did. An $1,100 truck repair is not a small thing for a family like mine, and a working truck is how my dad makes money in the first place. I told myself it was fine. I didn't bring it up again. That same summer, I want to be precise about the timing, because I've checked it since against old photos. Whitney, who was 19 and starting her second year at Pima Community College, got a car. A used 2004 Honda Civic, 68,000 miles, $3,200, paid in cash. I remember because I was there when it showed up in the driveway, and I remember being happy for her, genuinely, the way a 15-year-old is happy when something exciting happens in the house. I also remember, distinctly, doing math in my head that I didn't share with anyone. $3,200 was more than 7 Junior Explorer Academies. I never said anything. I was 15. It felt petty even to think it, but I thought it, and then I filed it away, and over the years I built a quiet little ledger in my head, not of dollar amounts exactly, but of moments. Whitney's semester abroad in Spain during college. Whitney's wedding 4 years ago, which my parents paid for almost entirely, the venue, the caterer, her dress. The down payment on Whitney's first house 2 years ago, which I knew about because my mom mentioned it casually, the way you'd mention the weather. Tom and I were able to help Whitney out with the down payment. Isn't that wonderful? I went to Pima Community College myself, then transferred to Pima's paramedic program, which I paid for almost entirely with loans and a part-time job at a grocery store. I have, as of this year, $11,000 left on those loans. I'm 29. I've been a paramedic for 6 years, and I'm good at it, genuinely good at it, the kind of good where senior medics ask for you on hard calls. But at family dinners, when people ask what I do, my mom still sometimes says, "Dani's still figuring some things out, career-wise." Even though I have a stable, full-time job with a county contract and benefits, while in the same conversation, someone will mention that Whitney just listed a $400,000 property in the foothills, like it's the most natural thing in the world to bring up. Whitney is a real estate agent. She's good at it, too. I want to be fair. She works hard, she's personable, she remembers names and birthdays and which clients have dogs. But she also got her real estate license at 23 with no debt, no rent to pay because she was still living at home, and a starter loan from our parents to cover her first few months of slow commission checks. Nobody ever called that a loan that needed paying back, as far as I know. Nobody ever brought it up again. I want to be clear. I didn't spend my 20s walking around bitter about a $3,200 car from 14 years ago. Most of the time, I didn't think about any of it at all. It was just the shape of things, the water our family swam in. Whitney was the one things worked out for, and I was the one who worked things out for myself, and that was just how it had always been. There was one person in my life who I think saw the shape of things too, and never said so directly, but who quietly, consistently, tried to even it out in small ways. My grandmother, my mom's mother, Joan, lived about 15 minutes from us, in a little house off Wilmot Road with a grapefruit tree in the backyard that produced more grapefruit than any human being could ever want. Grandma Joan was sharp, funny, and not the type to hug you and tell you she loved you. She showed it in other ways. She'd slip me $20 bills for gas, even when I didn't have anywhere particular to drive. When I got into the paramedic program and found out it required a $480 EMT certification course as a prerequisite, on top of everything else, Grandma Joan wrote me a check for the full amount and said, "This is between us. Your mother worries about money enough as it is, and I don't need her feeling some kind of way about it. You're going to do something real with your life, Dani. I want to help with that, and that's my business, not hers." Grandma Joan died 3 years ago of a stroke fairly suddenly. I think about that conversation, "You're going to do something real with your life," more than almost anything else she ever said to me. At the time, I just took it as Grandma being Grandma, generous and a little blunt. I didn't think there was anything underneath it. I know better now. If you've ever had someone in your family who saw you clearly, even when nobody else seemed to, even in small, quiet ways, a check, a $20 bill, a sentence you didn't understand the weight of until years later, I'd love to hear about them in the comments. I read every one. Now, back to last December. Last Christmas, my Uncle Frank, my mom's younger brother, retired from the post office, recently very into genealogy as a hobby, showed up to Christmas dinner practically vibrating with excitement. He'd done one of those Ancestry DNA kits a few months earlier, mostly out of curiosity, and the results had come back showing he was 5% Indigenous American, likely, based on the regional breakdown, connected to one of the Tohono O'odham communities here in southern Arizona, going back probably 4 or 5 generations on our grandfather's side. Uncle Frank had brought printouts. He'd brought a folder. He talked for probably 20 minutes about haplogroups and centimorgans, most of which went over my head, but the gist was, he wanted to trace it further, build out the family tree, find out more. And as a kind of let's all do this together gesture, he'd bought DNA kits for everyone at the table, 5 of them, in little boxes with bows on them like stocking stuffers. Me, Whitney, my parents, and my cousin Brett. Most of us laughed it off a little, the way you do with an enthusiastic relative's hobby. My dad said something like, "I already know where I'm from, Frank, right here." But we all took the kits home. I did mine that same week, mostly because it felt easier than explaining why I wouldn't. Whitney did hers too. I remember her saying, half joking, "I bet mine comes back boring, just like extremely Irish." Then everyone forgot about it. Life happened. Spit tubes sat in mailboxes for longer than they should have. I think mine sat on my kitchen counter for almost 3 weeks before I finally mailed it. Results take 6 to 8 weeks. Mine came back in February, extremely Irish and German, exactly as boring as I'd expected, with a small surprise percentage of Eastern European that nobody in the family could explain and nobody much cared about. I looked at it for about 5 minutes, thought, neat, and went back to my life. Whitney's results came back in early March. I want to tell you what I know about that week, because I've pieced most of it together since, from things my mom and Whitney have both told me. Whitney's ethnicity results didn't look anything like the rest of ours, where Uncle Frank, my mom, my dad, and I all showed some combination of Irish, German, English, and that small Eastern European percentage, the stuff Uncle Frank had been excitedly mapping onto our family tree for months. Whitney's results came back almost entirely Southern European. Significant Italian and Greek ancestry, with smaller percentages of North African. Nothing matching what Uncle Frank had been building out. Nothing matching the rest of us at all. At first, Whitney told me later, she just thought it was funny, a fluke. Guess I'm the weird one kind of thing, the way people sometimes joke about a milkman. She actually texted Uncle Frank a screenshot with a laughing emoji. Guess I'm not part of your tribe, Frank? Lol. But then she scrolled down to the DNA relatives section of the app. The part that shows you people in the database who share enough DNA with you to be identifiable as close relatives. And at the very top of her list, flagged as a likely first cousin or closer, was a name she didn't recognize. Patricia Whitfield. Now I need to explain something here, because if you're not from Tucson, the name Whitfield might not mean anything to you. But if you are from Tucson or anywhere in southern Arizona, you've seen that name. Whitfield Realty Group has been one of the biggest names in Tucson real estate for almost 50 years, commercial developments, luxury home listings, half the billboards on the east side at one point or another. It's the kind of name that, if you work in real estate like Whitney does, you absolutely know. Whitney sent the woman a message, polite, curious, the kind of message you send when a DNA app tells you you're related to a stranger and you're more amused than anything. Hi, this is a little random, but Ancestry says we might be related, first cousins, or closer. Just curious if that means anything to you, no worries if not. Patricia Whitfield wrote back 4 words 2 days later. I'll have to check. And then nothing, no follow-up, the message just sat there, read with no response for over a week. Whitney told me that's when she started feeling something she couldn't quite name, not suspicion exactly, more like the feeling you get when you walk into a room and somehow know someone's been talking about you right before you walked in. She mentioned the whole thing to my mom, almost in passing, over the phone, the weird ethnicity results, the cousin match, the name Whitfield, the message that went nowhere. My mom didn't say anything on the phone, but 2 days later, she called Whitney and asked her to come over on Sunday. And asked me to come too, which wasn't unusual. Sunday dinners were a regular thing, except that when I got there, my dad wasn't home and my mom had clearly been crying. That's the moment I started this story with. My mom, at the kitchen table, the dish towel, sit down, both of you. Only 3% of people who watch a video like this actually subscribe. If stories about the things families don't say out loud, until, suddenly, they have to, are the kind of thing you want more of, that's the only reason to tap that button. Okay, let's get to what she told us. My mother told us that Whitney was adopted. Not adopted in some abstract, paperwork 30 years ago sense that everyone already knew and nobody talked about. Adopted in the sense that nobody, not me, not Whitney, not, as far as my mom said, almost anyone outside my parents and one attorney had ever known. Whitney had grown up her entire life believing, like I had, that she was my parents' biological daughter. She found out she wasn't from a DNA app on a random Sunday in March, at 33 years old. Here's what my mother told us, as best as I can lay it out. In 1992, my mother was 30 years old and had been trying to get pregnant for almost 5 years, with no success. Around that same time, my mother's cousin, a woman named Renata, who worked as a housekeeper for a wealthy Tucson family, came to my mom with something delicate. The family she worked for, the Whitfields, had a 17-year-old daughter who was pregnant, unmarried, and the family wanted the situation handled quietly. A private adoption, arranged outside the formal foster system, through an attorney, with the birth records sealed. Renata knew my mom and dad were struggling to have kids. She made the introduction. My parents adopted Whitney as a newborn in October of 1992 through a private arrangement brokered by a Tucson attorney whose name my mom still remembered. All these years later, without hesitation. That's how significant this was to her, even after 33 years of not saying it out loud. And as part of that arrangement, this is the part that, when my mom said it, made the whole shape of my childhood rearrange itself in front of me in real time. The Whitfield family set up what my mom called an account. Not a one-time payment. An ongoing arrangement managed through the same attorney that my parents could draw on for the child's benefit. A phrase my mom said had been in the original paperwork, word for word, 33 years ago, and that she'd never forgotten. For 33 years, anything that could reasonably be described as being for Whitney's benefit, private school tuition in middle school, the semester in Spain, the wedding, the down payment on her house, even my mom admitted quietly, looking at the table instead of at me. The car when Whitney was 19 had been paid for, fully or partly, through that account. I asked the only question I could think to ask. I asked if I'd had an account too. My mom looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "No, honey, you were ours. We didn't need an account for you. You were just our daughter." I want to sit with that sentence for a second because I've sat with it a lot since. You were just ours. It was said with so much love. I don't doubt, even now, that my mother meant it as the most natural, uncomplicated thing in the world, that I, unlike Whitney, had never needed an explanation, an arrangement, a workaround, because I simply belonged fully, without conditions. But what it meant in practice for 30 years was this. Every time something cost money in our house, there were two separate financial realities at play, and only one of us knew it. For Whitney, there was almost always a way, sometimes a slow one, sometimes one that took a phone call to an attorney first, but a way. For me, there wasn't a hidden account. There was just whatever my parents could actually, really afford out of an HVAC business and a part-time pharmacy job, and a $450 fire department camp. The summer I was 15, lost to an $1,100 transmission repair, was simply real, in a way that nothing of Whitney's, financially, ever quite was. My parents weren't choosing Whitney over me, exactly, not in the way I might have assumed, all those years, in the moments I tried not to notice. They were just protecting an arrangement. Keeping a 33-year-old promise to a family with a name on half the billboards in town, a promise that had quietly funded my sister's entire life, made at a moment when my parents were desperate for a child and a frightened 17-year-old needed her family's secret kept. I want to tell you about Whitney's reaction because it's the part of this I've thought about the most. For the first few minutes, Whitney cried, really cried, the kind of crying where you can't get full sentences out. She kept saying, I don't understand, over and over. And I want to be honest, in that moment I felt for her, genuinely. Whatever had happened with money, over all those years, Whitney had just found out that the people she'd called mom and dad her entire life weren't, biologically, her parents at all. And she'd found that out from an app on a Sunday because of a cousin's hobby. But then, maybe 10 minutes later, after the first wave had passed, Whitney looked up, wiped her face, and asked, "Wait, the Whitfields, Whitfield Realty. Mom, are they? Do they know about me? Like now, does Patricia Whitfield know who I am?" My mom said she didn't know, that the message Whitney had sent, the "I'll have to check," had probably gone straight to whoever still managed the arrangement, and that yes, by now, they almost certainly knew. And Whitney, through tears, still catching her breath, said, "So, I might actually be, like, related to them. For real. Does that mean, legally, if she's my biological family, wouldn't that mean something for me?" I watched my sister's face do something I recognized, because I think, in different rooms, at different moments, over 30 years, I'd seen versions of it on other faces in my family. Not malice. Just a kind of fast, almost involuntary calculation, a door opening somewhere, and someone immediately, instinctively, checking what was on the other side of it for them. My mom didn't answer that question. I don't think she could. I drove home that night and didn't say much to anyone for a couple of days. I want to tell you what happened in the weeks after, because it's not dramatic, and I think that's the truest part of this story. My dad and I had one conversation about it, just the two of us, a week or so later in his garage, where most of our real conversations have happened over the years. He didn't make excuses. He said, "We should have found a way to make things more even for you, Dani. I don't have a good reason why we didn't, except that the Whitfield money was just there for Whitney's stuff, and our money was just ours for everything else, including you. It wasn't fair." I knew it wasn't fair, sometimes, in the moment. I just didn't know what I was supposed to do about it without telling you everything, and we'd promised never to tell anyone everything. I told him I appreciated him saying that. I meant it. I also told him I didn't need anything from him, no money, no grand gesture. I think he understood that I meant that too. Whitney and I talked eventually, a few weeks later. She apologized, not for anything specific, really, more for the general shape of things, once she'd had time to think about it. She told me she'd reached out to Patricia Whitfield again and gotten a longer response this time, polite, careful, lawyer-reviewed sounding, acknowledging the connection but making clear there were no plans for any kind of relationship or further arrangement beyond what already existed. Whitney said it felt like a door closing gently, but closing. I think some part of her had spent a few weeks imagining a very different kind of story. A long-lost, wealthy family, a second chance at something, and the actual answer was much smaller and much more final than that. I didn't get an apology tour. I didn't get a check. Nothing about my student loans changed. I still owe about $11,000, and I'll pay it off the normal way, the way I always planned to, on a paramedic's salary over the next several years. But something did change. A couple of weeks after that Sunday, I was going through an old box of photos at my parents' house, looking for a picture of Grandma Joan for a small memorial thing my cousin was putting together, and I found a card. A birthday card from Grandma Joan to me, from the year I turned 16, the year after the summer with the camp and the car. Inside, in her handwriting, she'd written the usual birthday things, and then, at the bottom, almost like an afterthought, "You don't always get the easy road, Dani girl, but you've got the steadier feet. Don't ever let anybody make you feel like that's the same thing as less." I'd read that card when I was 16 and thought it was just Grandma being a little philosophical, the way she sometimes was. I know now that she knew. Maybe not every detail. I doubt my parents told her about an account, specifically, but she knew enough. She'd watched the same shape of things I'd watched for years, and she'd done what she could, in her own way, to make sure I never quite believed it meant what it looked like it meant. Even at 29, with a job I love and $11,000 left to pay off, and a family that's still figuring out how to talk to each other now that the biggest secret in our house isn't a secret anymore, I'm still learning things about where I actually stand in my own family. So here's where I've landed, looking back on all of it. 1. My parents weren't choosing Whitney over me. They were protecting a promise made before I was even born, and I got caught in the middle of it without knowing. 2. That missed camp, that car, I never said anything at the time. But I never forgot it, and it quietly became how I measured everything else. 3. You were just ours was meant with love. It was also, without anyone meaning it to be, the reason I never got the same help Whitney did. Both can be true. 4. Even mid-tears about finding out she was adopted, Whitney's first real question was about money. That told me something true, not that she's bad, just who she is. 5. Grandma Joan never explained why she helped me. She just did. I didn't understand it until much later, and that's usually how it goes with the people who actually have your back. If this story meant something to you, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell me about a moment from your own childhood that you measured everything else against without realizing it at the time. I read every one.